So every year, as part of the breeding program, we spend a lot of time on looking at new germplasm and new selections in the breeding program, but we also compare our material to other standards out there or other new cultivars out there, because if something is adapted to North Carolina, we want the growers to know about it. And so we trial them along with our material. And I'm going to present just that data today on the named things from other breeding programs. And this has been a compilation of work done by myself and Mark and Rocco Chabon, who recently retired, but I think he's on this call, so he might be able to pipe in there too if you have specific questions about some of our recent research. And then a graduate student, Katie Sheehan-Lust, who just finished up, but she helped compile all the data as well. So everybody knows what the standards are. I'm not going to go into them a whole lot. So there's 3 standards. Sweet Charlie is the early cultivar. You know all of its characteristics. It's early, and that's probably the best thing. You know, growers like to have something early. The next one is Chandler. It's the short day. It was a standard for a long period of time. When I first came here, there was nothing could beat Chandler. And that's what pretty much 90%, I would imagine, of the growers grew at that time. Not so much anymore, but it's still one of the favorites that is grown throughout the state. And the other one is other standard, what we call is Camarosa. It is also a mid-season one, a late season, mid to late season. It's a little bit firmer than Chandler, decent flavor, especially at the end of the season. And it's been around about the same amount of time as those other 2. And so those are the 3 standards: Sweet Charlie, Chandler, and Camarosa. So there are alternatives to consider for you out there. We've trialed many of these selections or cultivars through 3 different locations. So we have trials locations at the Central Crops Research Station in Clayton, at the Piedmont Research Station in Salisbury, which is sort of Western North Carolina, not extreme Western, but central, just a little bit north of Charlotte. And then at the Horticulture Crops Research Station in Castle Haynes, so down by Wilmington area. So 3 different climates. And so we get a really good idea how they perform across the state. And they are the ones that I'm going to talk about are the ones that seem to be doing the best in our trials over time. And we are going to go through them from earliest to latest. So Rocco is the first one. It is the earliest one. It's about the Sweet Charlie season, short day or medium to size fruit, steady to moderate to high yields, depending on the year. It's a little bit soft, but it has an excellent flavor. It's really the one that we really like to bring home at the end of the day. Sometimes the seeds are at the surface or outside of the surface of the fruit, but not all the time. It's best for pick your own because of the softness of it, or other direct to consumer sales, something that you're not going to have to hold on your farm stand for a long time, but it really does have a nice flavor. We consider it as a Sweet Charlie alternative because of that early window, and it really is quite popular, and it's gaining popularity across the country, not just in North Carolina. Why plant it? It's early, and it's the one that we all like to eat in our research lab group here. Ruby June is another on the early-ish side, early to mid-season. Same thing, a short day, medium-sized fruit, very good flavor as well. Different flavor than Rocco has, but it's still a very good flavor. It's good for pick your own and other direct-to-consumer sales, and wholesale too. Seems to do pretty well. We consider it as a Chandler alternative. So we got Rocco as a Ruby June, or Rocco as a Sweet Charlie alternative, Ruby June as a Chandler alternative. Why plant it? It complements the other cultivars, and it has a really nice flavor. Camino Real is another short day type. It's early to mid-season, medium to large fruit. This one is from California, so it's firm. All that stuff from California is really firm because it's got to travel all across the country. It's dark red, in external and internal fruit color is darker than Camarosa when you slice it open. It's good for wholesale operations or pick your own as well. It's fairly disease tolerant, has good rain tolerance. And why plant it? It's firm. If you want something that is firm, Camino Real is your cultivar. Liz is a short day, again, cultivar, mid to late season, medium-sized fruit, and very high yields. It's one of the highest yielding cultivars that we have in trial over the years. It's moderately firm with improving flavor later in the season. It's best for pick your own and direct to consumer sales. So it's not really a shipper, but it can hold pretty well at your farm stand. fair rain tolerance. I would consider it as a Camarosa alternative. And why would you plant it? It has very high yields and consistently high yields. Merced is another California cultivar, a little bit older one. It's large fruit with moderate to high yields, firm flavor, fair flavor, and that's what California's fair is giving it a lot of credit. Firm, as all California cultivars are. It's a lighter fruit color. You can see in that picture there on the right. It has a smaller canopy, so when you have a concern about light getting into the canopy and burning fruit, that would, you need to consider that when you are planting Merced. It's recommended maybe a 12-inch planting distance rather than a little bit larger one. And then maybe might need a little bit more nitrogen throughout the spring. Due to that small that small canopy, sunburn is very common, and we found that it's not real rain tolerant. Why plant Merced? It has a nice appearance and it's firm. Radiance is another variety from, it's actually, this one's from Florida. Short day, early to mid-season. It's medium-sized fruit, fair to poor yield. What happens with all the cultivars that we trial from Florida is that they bloom really early because they have such a short chilling period. So once that chilling period is met in the winter, we get that first thaw in January, early February. We get some flowers bloom out there, and then we get cold again. So we lose that first flush of fruit. So that's why we have poor yield, but it does perform once it kicks into the regular season. It does well. It can be used under tunnels. It's not real rain tolerant. Why plant it? I say don't plant it because it's so disease susceptible. I'll be interested to see if Bill has any thoughts about this. Some growers do use it in North Carolina, and have moderate success, mostly down in the southeastern part of the state, I believe. Albion is pretty popular for some growers in some location. It's an everbearing type. It's mid-season, but then can produce a crop throughout the summer as well. And in the fall, it's large to very large fruit, moderate yields in the spring, and can produce the fruit, as I mentioned, throughout the season. Very, very good to very good flavor. Some folks really like it. It's good for those extended season tunnels production, and perhaps in the greenhouse as well. It's good for direct to consumer sales and wholesale. And plants need a little bit more nitrogen because of that repeated fruiting throughout the summer. For fall production, you want to plant early to mid-August to begin fruiting in September. It can especially attract two-spotted spider mites, so be aware of that and be on the lookout for that, and not real rain tolerance. Why plant it? It's got that summer harvest. If you want to continue your harvest throughout the season, that's a nice one, and it also has really nice flavor. Fronteras is another California variety. It's everbearing like Albion was. Large berry, high yields, firm fruit. Everything from California is very firm, and a fair flavor, and that's being nice. I think plants need more nitrogen during the spring. It's good for direct to consumer sales and wholesale. For fall production, you want to make sure you plant it early to mid-August, and that's, we're getting to beyond that mid-August period to early September, depending on where you are. It's not real rain tolerant. Why would you plant Fronteras? Because it is firm and it has high yield, and that's what California cultivars usually do have. Another California cultivar, and probably the oldest of the group here, is Monterey. It's everbearing again, medium large berry, medium high yield. And all these yield data that we have that I mentioned here, it's on a website that I'll show you a little bit later. So you can go ahead and look at the yields from our different trials at the different locations. Monterey has very good flavor and is firm. It's good for extended season, low tunnel, high tunnel greenhouse production. It's good for both direct to consumer sales and wholesale. Plants will need more nitrogen in the spring because of the high yields. And again, if you're going to plant it for fall production, you need to plant beginning mid-August to early September. Again, not very tolerant to rain. Why would you plant Monterey? Because it's firm and it's got some decent flavor, and it has a good extended season of production. Like I said before, there are many others that we have trialed at NC State and at various research stations for anywhere from 1 to 3 years, depending on plant availability and how we thought it was doing. So we have tested stuff for materials from the University of California at Davis, University of Florida. This year, we're getting some of the newer stuff from University of Florida, from Lassen Canyon, from the New Jersey breeding program, and from European breeding program. So all that data is there available at that website right there. And I bet you if you just Googled North Carolina strawberry portal breeding trials, you can land on this this website and find all the data. So we have data since 2015, yield data from all the locations since 2015. Here's just a little overview of what some of the cultivars that we trialed, and you see a lot of the California ones in this one. So Warrior, Victor, Valiant are some of the, and Royal Royce, Moxie are some of the newer cultivars coming out of California. And it's just surprising how firm those are once you try them. Bill, I don't know if you ever saw them down at Castle Hayne when they were growing down there, but man, they are firm berries. We have a long ways to go. A little side story I just wanted to share with you here. One of Katie Sheehan Lest, which is a graduate student that she just graduated this month, came from California, worked with the UC Davis breeding program, and worked with Nature Ripe and the Cal Poly, University of California, Cal Poly strawberry breeding trials too there. And she said when she first came to NC State, she said, boy, you know, these aren't as firm as California, but they sure do have good flavor. So she said that California is always explaining and trying to makes excuses for not having good flavor. She said, but North Carolina State University has good flavor in their strawberries. So we're very proud of that, and we are working on that. And we are working on trying to get firmer. I don't know if we want to ever go as firm as California stuff, but that is one of the challenges and one of the fun challenges of a breeding program. A little bit of an elephant in the room, Rocco and Liz's availability is kind of sketchy right now. The demand for Rocco is very high, availability is low. There's sort of a perfect storm came in there. We had one of our nurseries have a disease outbreak, the primary nursery that we worked with. We had sent some tips up to some material up to Canada during 2021, and it got stuck at the border due to COVID. And then the local nursery here in North Carolina is dedicated to the Lassen Canyon varieties mostly, so they're not carrying the NC State varieties. But we're working on it. We were working on other Canadian nurseries and other nurseries in the country as well. So we're working on those available sources, and we really do want to get these to you soon. Ask your nurseries where you can get Rocco and Liz. Put the pressure on them so we can they can come and we can work out a license for them. So we are working on additional nursery sources. Actually, talking to 2 today. And this is just some pictures of some strawberries that are in advanced trials right here, are going to be in 2022. These are all 21 selections. So we made them in 2021. And what we particularly like this, I think this was 2131 was one of our favorites, has really nice flavor, very, very high yields. And you'll see that, well, that data's not posted yet, but that is some of our 21s looking really nice, in addition to some 19s and 20s too. So that number right there, 21, means it was chosen or selected in 2021. We also have selections from 2018, 19, and 20. So that's all that's happening here. And I just want to thank the North Carolina Strawberry Association, North American Strawberry Growers Association, Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium, and NC State University. That's it. Any questions from anybody?
Well, doesn't look like it.
No questions? All right. I need to go to another meeting, so I'm going to jump off, but hopefully Mark can answer your questions or relay them to me if you have a question.
Yeah, Gina, I do have a comment there. I want a copy of that slide set. That's really nice. Yeah,
Okay.
That's to have the information on those cultivars in the good and the bad is
Exactly.
really, really good to have. So thank you.
I'll share that with you right away. Thanks, everybody. Unshare. There we go.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and for everybody else, all the slides will be shared as PDFs to everybody who's attending this webinar as well.
So do you want me to put that in the Google Drive then too, Mark?
Yeah, you can do that, or I
Okay.
can talk to you again. You know,
Okay.
whatever works for you.
Okay, I can do that. And I'll
Okay.
send it to you as well, Bill, in a PowerPoint.
Mhm.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Talk to you
Right,
later.
thanks, Gina.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so we'll talk about fumigation and pre-plant considerations. I think we also talk a little bit about late planting because it seems like plant material is pretty late this year for everybody. So it's something we're gonna have to talk about as well. So it's gonna take a while, Bill. You guys see that? Amanda, can you see this?
Yeah, you're good, Mark.
Cool. And you're recording too.
Yes, it's still
Good,
recording.
because I forgot again. All right, so fumigation pre-plant considerations. It's a lot of stuff to cover. This is going to be a little bit the 30,000 foot overview. But if you have questions, just put them into the chat box or into the Q&A. Happy to answer any questions as I can to my availability. We're going to talk about, so our aims for today is like to just do like a refresher on knowledge, just see there are a couple of updates which I want to give as well, and then I hope that we have some answers and questions and answers that we can attend over this meeting. So very first, I would like to say that there are, especially for new growers or people who are in their first or second year or who do need a refresher, there is a strawberry school which we developed last year, and there are 2 sessions on pre-plant, and I think there is an extra session on pre-plant fertility in there as well. So you should look at this. You will find this on the Small Foods website here, and again, this will be shared with you all, but definitely worth looking. Those presentations are between 5 and 15 minutes long, and definitely worth having a look for, especially for those of you who do need a refresher or who are new to the entire strawberry game. Also, strawberry growing has become a lot more expensive, and we also addressed that a little bit. There are some corners where you can potentially cut on cost, but there are also some corners which you shouldn't be cutting on cost, and that's what we're going to discuss today too. A lot of people want to cut cost on the pre-plant phase. That's not necessarily a good idea, because the pre-plant phase is your foundation of your strawberry crop. And if you cut corners and you do a less good job, or you do have less inputs, you might affect your strawberry crop later as well. So we'll discuss a little bit there where you could cut corners, where you couldn't, since everything has become a lot more expensive now. So yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about, and just like for everybody who is just new to the strawberry game, just as a reminder, there's several steps to the strawberry to a strawberry season in North Carolina. What we are going to talk about is step 1 to 3. So basically, fumigation, site selection, pre-plant phase, transplanting, very important, and then we talk a little bit about post-transplant. That will cover all our time today. So we're not going to go over winter dormancy. We will talk a little bit about row cover use to increase growing degree days, because some of the plant material will be late this year. So that's something which we at least have to consider. There are some cultivars also where you do want to do that. There are others where you probably don't have to do this. And again, that's worth a separate webinar really, but this is what we're going to talk about. Yeah, so those 3 steps, and then we're not going to talk about step 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's later in the season, and we don't have time today to talk about all that. So let's start with planting dates, and so they're very different, and usually for bare roots or for any cutoffs that you get from a California nursery, usually you want to be like 3 to 5 days earlier than with a plug plant. So those are more for plug plants, and we usually shoot in our region here in Raleigh and that region for the first week of October. At the lower coastal plains, we shoot for the 2nd week of October. And if you are like further west, the further west you are, the earlier is your planting date, the more difficult is it to become planting. Let me close my door for a second, please. And I'm back. Sorry about that. So the students are back and it's really loud outside. So we have, so the further west you are going, the earlier your planting date will be. Site selection is a really important part of your strawberry operation. The most important part is you need to have a location which has good water drainage in the hill area, so in the western part of North Carolina. That has to do with erosion, and of course your soil should be aerated as well. The better your soil is aerated, the better it is for the strawberry plant. And another thing which is really important is that your pH is between 6 and 6.5. We talk about this in a second. This all should have already happened. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, because this is usually something which you do June, July, and not in August. So yes, and then wildlife can be a very big problem in strawberries. We do have the problem with deer every year where we have our strawberry research plots. And what worked for us the best is that we put a fence around the strawberry plants even before we plant. So usually what we ended up doing is that we put a fence around, and then we lay the beds and we move with the tractor into the plot. So that's possible on smaller plots. It's probably not possible on large acreage, but on smaller acreage, that's definitely possible. It helped us a lot to keep the deer out from the very beginning. There are two types of fences which you can use. There is this double fence, which is a little bit lower. Some deer populations learn how to cross those. And then what we ended up is we put a relatively expensive, several foot high fence, which is charged with electricity around our strawberry field. And that eventually kept the deer from going into the field. Deer can cause quite a bit of damage to strawberries. Usually they eat, not like in this picture, the fruit. Usually they eat the plants, and often they eat the crowns. That's often happening in winter when you get your chilling hours to develop your flowers inside the crowns. And that can cause quite a bit of damage, and you will not get the yield which you need to be cost effective later. So deer control is extremely important in our areas, in some areas at least. And usually the best control method is still a fence. I know it's a big investment, but it will help keeping the deer out of the field. As I said, soil preparation, sandy loams to clayey loams are preferable. So everything which has a sand and is well aerated and has good water drainage is important for strawberries. Soils with high rock content are not preferred. So if you do have a lot of rocks, a lot of clods in your soil, it would be good to like chisel the soil and rip the soil so that you get rid of most of the stuff. And you need to be able to form at least a 6-inch high bed. So that's also important. The beds are usually higher than with vegetable production. And the reason for that is because you do want to have a certain amount of drainage in your bed. Strawberries really do not like any standing water. And it's important that if you have standing water in the field, which can happen in the eastern part quite often, that at least your bed remains drained, so that your strawberry plants, it's not affected by the standing water in the field. So that's important. Also, soil sampling should have been done by now. We target a pH from 6 to 6.5. We usually sample in 8 inches depth. You should sample in a grid, and also you should have done this by now. And then usually we put down a pre-plant fertilizer, depending on your soil sample. It's not just lime, but also phosphorus and potassium. We talk about this a little bit. Often the field is not treated the same, so often you do need several different nutrients across an entire field. So this is where you can save a little money if you do hire a company which does a grid sampling for you and tells you where to apply exactly how much of your nutrients. That often helps you not throwing money into the field that then later is lost. Again, it's a tiny little thing, but it might help you later to do that, because a field often has different requirements, even on an acre, can be very different. And it's certainly true for larger acreage. to do a grid sampling and then do a more precise pre-plant fertilizer application. Yeah, so as I said, remove all debris, all the trash, work your soil deep, especially if you have rocks in the soil. For the eastern part, you don't have to do that as much because you often have like more sandy soils, which are better to form a bed as well. But in the western part, you might have to do this prior to planting. So as fertilizer, we usually apply the fertilizer shortly before bed formation. According to your soil test recommendations, as a rule of thumb, we do want to apply 60 pounds of nitrogen per acre and 120 pounds of phosphorus and potassium per acre. But again, it depends a lot on your soil results, what you're actually going to apply. And again, it can, especially if you're on a larger acreage, it can help to do a more precise grid sampling and then apply different fertilizer based on what your results are for those different grids. There is a pretty good recommendation out there from 2015. It's also linked in this slide set, and I highly recommend to look at this, especially this year. There are some fertilizers are really expensive, so you do want to make sure that you don't apply more fertilizer than you really need. So talk to the specialist at NCDA, or talk to me, or talk to other people if you're not sure, before you buy all that fertilizer and apply it in the field. Again, now we're talking about the big thing, fumigation and bedding. So now you have worked your soil. This should have all been done by now. You have worked your soil, you adjusted your pH, and you do have ordered or bought your fertilizer. And now we're talking about fumigation and bedding. Again, there are several planting spaces recommendations out there in North Carolina. Most of the growers I know go with a 14-inch planting space that gives you about 15,000 plants per acre. It depends a lot on your vigor. So in the western part, you often get a little bit less vigor on your plants. So you might go a little bit closer on that, but most cultivars are relatively vigorous here. Merced would be the one exception which I have in my mind right now that definitely should go on a 12-inch planting space. And sometimes Ruby June can be a little bit smaller as well, depending on where you are as well. But usually 14 inches, that's the amount of plants you have. You should also have ordered your plants by now. And again, for the people who are new to this, or like as a refresher, we do want to plant those in a triangle so that every planting space is the same between the plants. And yeah, that's usually what it is. We don't often go on a 15-inch planting space. We usually go with like around 14 inches in North Carolina. For fumigation, which is something which should happen in the next couple of weeks, soil conditions are much more important than timing for fumigation. I got this question this year a couple of times because we had this dry period. So if you are fumigants have a pre-plant period where you cannot plant after fumigant. That's 21 days with most of the fumigants. We recommend to do it a little bit earlier because often the weather conditions in North Carolina are not as conducive, and it will take a little bit more time for the fumigant to air off. So we usually recommend like about 4 weeks before planting that you should fumigate with Picklor 60. But if you're 6 weeks out and the soil conditions are great and you can do it, then that's when I would do it. So the soil conditions are definitely a higher priority than your timing. But 4 weeks, 4 to 3.5 weeks before planting, that's in my opinion at least, the minimum time when you should apply your fumigants. Important is that your soil is around 70% field capacity, so it has about 70% water content or plant available water content. Too wet of a soil will take longer to fumigate, and the fumigant will not be as effective as well as with a soil which is too dry. And the same goes for temperatures. We usually hit those temperatures above 50 degrees Fahrenheit for fumigant to be working, so we shouldn't be too worried about this. But again, the field capacity and the aeration of the soil is extremely important. So working your soil before fumigation and making sure that you are around a soil which is not too wet and not too dry is extremely important for the fumigant to work as well. As I said, more important than the timing, minimum 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks before planting. But if you can do it earlier and the soil conditions are better earlier, you still that's still completely feasible. Yeah, so I guess you all know this, so we're just going to go over this very quick. This is a typical fumigation rig as we use it in North Carolina. I think very important is to understand that it takes some practice. If you do it on your own, you need to have like a license, and you need to be certified, and you need to have fumigation plan, and it takes practice to do this. So I would definitely run some practice beds. Even if you do not fumigate and you only shape your beds, you do want to run some practice rows. So you see here on the left hand side, this is a practice row where you have like a little kink in here, because you do want to, what's really, really important is that you do have a very good plastic soil interface where you can plant your plants later. So you do not want to have, you don't want to have like any kinks in your plastic, and you don't want to have any rows in your any curves in your plastic. You do want to have a straight bed with a very good soil plastic interface, and it will take some practice to do that. So we usually lay some plastic rows before we some practice rows before we do this, and this is at I believe the Clayton Research Station, and this is a cylinder of picklor. This is like a drip tape. And what we also do is we pre-bed. So this is important to raise the bed a little bit. So we often want to get like a little bit higher bed shape, and we usually pre-bed, which means we don't lay the plastic and we don't fumigate. We're just gonna run over it with the plastic layer without plastic to pre-bed our bed, and then we come back into the same row with the machine and lay our plastic, and that way we can raise the bed a little bit higher and make it more and put it into better shape for strawberries as well. So very common practice for us. Those are two different fumigants here. This is a Picklor 60 cylinder, and this is a biofumigant cylinder, Dominus, which we used in some of our research trials. Both of them are shank injected. You see here's a nitrogen cylinder. You have to weigh them. You have to see how much comes out of your shank. So for your fumigation plan, if you want to calculate the amount of fumigant that you want to inject, you do have to do all that. There are calculations out on the internet. We also published some stuff last year on fumigant calculations. We're going to send you all that information together with this presentation after this webinar. If you do have a custom fumigator, they usually do that for you. It's a much better option, but also a more expensive option. And as I said, there's a lot of cost. Fumigation costs went up this year, like everything else, plastic costs, transportation costs. So growing strawberries this year, if you don't have any fumigants left, and if you don't have fertilizer left from last year, will be more expensive than last year for sure. You know. So a wrong corner to save money is at your fumigation rates. So I would recommend the main reason we use fumigants in North Carolina is twofold. The first reason is you do want to control pathogens in the soil that might decrease your yield, not necessarily kill the plant, but decrease your yield. We do have quite a bit of those. For example, we have pythiums in the soil quite a bit that might affect your plants. And the other reason is weed control also affects your yield a lot. So there are reasons why you do want to fumigate, and we have consistently seen in I do fumigation work since 2015 and in North Carolina since 2017, 17. And I've consistently seen higher yields in fumigated plots versus non-fumigated plots under the same conditions. So it definitely has an effect, and but it also is very costly. And the wrong corner to save money is if you if you go down in your fumigation rates, because that only selects your pathogens. You might not be able to control everything you want to control. At the end of the day, you're throwing money into the field and it will not do anything. So I do highly recommend that if you choose to fumigate, then fumigate at a high rate, because because you do want to control your weeds and you do want to control your pathogens. Most of the fumigants that are available in North Carolina are pretty much the same chemistry. They're mixes of chlorpicrin and 1,3-D. Pichlor 60, for example, is a very common fumigant. Telone is also very common. And then we have other fumigants like Vapam and Kpam that are more common. That's a different chemistry, but they're still very effective. As I said, it is very important to stay with the recommended label rates and not go lower than that because you want to save money. It's the wrong corner to save money. If you choose to fumigate, then fumigate at the correct rate. Other fumigants which are not on this list is Dominus. I would say in our research trials, it worked very well for the eastern part when we shank it in. Again, it's something to consider. Price-wise, it's pretty right there with Pichlor 60 and 80. It also has 21 days, so pretty much the same deal. Fumigation bedding, we talked about this, our typical plastic size is 32 inches. Some are a little bit wider, and then we usually have 6 to 8 inches width, and then we usually on the 60-inch base. Some people are a little bit wider, so that's like a common thing for us in North Carolina. Again, the bed height is important. If you want to grow healthy strawberry plants, you need to be able to be around 6 inches at least, so that you do have enough drainage in your bed as well. Again, important is to practice your bed laying, to make sure that you do have a good soil plastic contact in your bed, because that really keeps your strawberries strong, and then don't save money on your fumigation. So now, if we talk about fumigation, we also have to talk about plastic, and again, there are different types of plastic and different manufacturers. We're not going too much into detail, but there are basically 3 big types of plastic that are available. That's PE film, VAF film, and TIF film. And PE film is a 1-layer plastic. It's very easy to lay. It's very thin plastic usually. What it doesn't do a good job on is it doesn't keep the fumigants in the soil very well. And there are several studies out there that show that. So from my point of view, I feel like if you already invest money into fumigants, then you also do want to invest money into like the right plastic that keeps your fumigant in the soil and doesn't let it aerate out too much. So in PE films, do let, especially with the 1,3-D component of your fumigant, let air out pretty quick after application. It's the cheapest plastic. If you do not fumigate, totally fine to use it. But if you fumigate and if you already invest money into fumigants, then I would also choose a plastic that keeps the fumigant more in the soil. Those plastics are usually 3-layer plastics or 5-layer plastics. The more layers, the more difficult it is to lay. The 5-layer TIF plastic is pretty thick and is a pain in the butt to lay on a single plastic layer, but doable. The VAF plastic is what we call the virtual impermeable film. Is a 3-layer plastic, and that keeps the fumigant more in the soil, and that is also available in our region usually, and has a better control efficiency in combination with your fumigant than a typical PE film. So if you already invest into fumigants, then I would also invest into a better plastic. Because they go hand in hand, really. Plastic color, that's a question I often get as well, is usually we use black plastic. Because of the winters we get, it keeps the temperature better in the soil. So
we did have a question, Mark, about
yeah.
So it says, should fumigant 4 weeks prior to planting and when applying plastic? I've never used a fumigant before, and I deal with
Oh.
many weeds. I am in Southwest Georgia.
Okay. Yeah. So usually usually most fumigants have 21 days, so 3 weeks. I feel like in our region that sometimes cuts it a little short because we do not have the weather conditions which allow the fumigant to air off for 21 days prior planting. So I would go a little bit longer than that. I would go 3.5 weeks if you can with fumigation, and then punch holes like 2-3 days before you actually plant your strawberries, because what can happen is that you get you can get fumigant damage if you plant into a fumigated soil and the fumigant didn't have time to dissipate before planting. So 3.5 weeks before planting, I think that should be still doable where you were at, and that will help with the weeds. There's another talk later on weed control, pre-plant, so pre-transplanting, which can help you with that as well. But fumigants usually help with weed control quite a bit, and what they sometimes don't control is nutsedge and other stuff, so that can still come up sometimes, but most weeds are fairly well controlled with fumigant use. Definitely better than without, especially if you're in a weedy area. That is my option to do. And then I would use, as I showed before, I would use this plastic layer which fumigants at the same time, and I would use a VAF plastic and not a PE plastic if I would fumigate. So we talked about this a little bit already. Temperature above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. As I said, don't save on fumigants. If you choose to fumigate with the rate that is recommended. Don't save money on your fumigant. That's the wrong corner to cut. And this is just like a picture, like a little table, just to show you what the difference is between a Talon C35. So Talon C35 has a relatively high 1,3-D content, but there's also chlorpicrin in it. And you can see here, especially on nutsedge and weed control, if you use a VAF or TAF plastic, you get a lot better control on nutsedge and other weeds compared to the same fumigant with a normal PE plastic. So the plastic does make a difference, especially when you do weed control, when you're shooting for weed control. So you should, again, it's the wrong corner to cut your cost. And then another thing which I want to talk about is safety in PPE. I know it's a pain, but I would at least recommend to wear a full face respirator and make sure that your cartridges are where you're at. Those fumigants, especially if you apply them every year, they're very dangerous chemicals, and they can cause quite some damage over time. So this is me in the middle of somewhere around a very hot day in end of August, and it was not fun, but I would definitely try to do that. So before we go into transplanting, I see there's another question. Picro 6 at 180 pounds per acre in the past. It depends how you calculate this 108 pounds per acre. If it was your overall over the entire field rate, then yeah, that's fine. But if it was what you applied actually in your bed, then it should be higher than that. So depends on 180 pounds per acre is okay for if you calculate it for the entire acreage. No, there are no SC credits here, unfortunately, because we pulled this together like in 5 minutes. So unfortunately, we didn't have time to apply for SC credits. All right. All right. So now we're here. We have fumigated. We have laid our plastic. We fumigated 3.5, 4 weeks before we actually transplant. We have done our soil pH. We have put our pre-plant down. So all that has happened. And now we get our plants finally, which will be happening this year, most likely too late for most of the people. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. But first, I want to make sure that we talk about transplanting and the difference between a good transplant and a low quality transplant, because that can have, again, that after you pre-plant, that's the other big thing which can have a huge impact on your yield later. So you're building the foundation of your strawberry field already now. You know, so if you cut corners now, you will see that later in the yield, in the field. So transplanting, very important to do it right, and very important to have good transplant materials. So what that means usually is that you do want to have a very well developed root ball. That's true for bare roots as well. You do want to have on your cutoff quite some main roots and some branches going off your crown. You do want to have on a bare root also a nice crown diameter. So you don't want to get anything which is lower than 0.5 millimeters in diameter on a bare root. And the same for a plug plant. You do want to have a very developed root ball. You don't want to see a lot of substrate when you take that plant out of your 50 cell tray. And you also do want to have like 2-3 nicely developed leaves on that plug plant as well. So I want to show you some pictures of what not to plant, because we see that every year that's very normal. So what I usually recommend is to order 5 to 10% more plants than you need, because there will be always plants that you do not want to plant in the field, and you do not want to be in a situation where you do have field left but no plants left. So you do want to make sure that you do have plenty of plant materials, so order a little bit more than you need, so that you can sort out the things which haven't grown very well. For example, this one here is a tip that has not set any roots, as you can see here. If you have something like this in a tray, you do not, this will never perform. So this is something you do not want to plant. The same with those plugs here. Those were plugged too deep. So you see the crown is under the ground, under the soil. While that is okay for other crops, it's not okay for strawberries. And the second part I wanted to show you here is also that the root ball is not very well developed. So those didn't develop very well root ball, and the crowns are not, the crowns are buried in the substrate. So that's something you do not want to plant, because that will never perform very well. So you do want to have enough planting material to get rid of this. If we talk about planting plug plants, it's very important with strawberries that you train your people every year. There's every year, at least in my experience, some fields and some growers that unfortunately had untrained personnel helping, and then we're getting into a range where we have mostly, usually it's too deeply planted. Sometimes we have also too shallow. Either way, those plants will not perform. So you really have to make sure that you plant your plug plants in the correct way. The crown has to be above ground, but all the root ball has to be below ground. That's very, very critical for a good establishment of strawberries. And you have to think it from that perspective. This year, we're going to be probably 1-2 weeks too late with our planting. So we only have a certain window of time where those plants can develop. And it has to be, and the better the conditions for the plant are, the better your plants will develop. Maybe the 2-3 crowns that you need to go into dormancy, to go into winter, so that you have your yield later in January, February. So those critical 6 to 8 weeks between planting and dormancy, that's important that you provide your plant with enough nutrients and with the right conditions so that they can develop into a healthy plant before dormancy. Those are very critical time in the development of a plant. So the same with bare roots. You don't want to plant it too deep. You don't want to plant it too high. They're not going to perform. They're probably going to even die. And the other critical thing is that you have a big enough hole to bend your roots. You can prune the roots if you get a bare root plant, and often some nurseries do prune it for you, but you still can prune some roots so that they fit into the hole. Just don't prune too many off. But it's important that you plant them in the correct depth. So the crown, again, is above ground. The roots are all below ground. It's actually the same system. Again, with bare root plants, they need to be watered in a lot more than plug plants. So we usually say you should water in your plants for plug plants 2 to 3 days. At least with bare root plants, you want to do that like for a week or two. So they need to be planted a little bit earlier to get to the same stage where your plug band will be before dormancy. So now after planting, and this is the last thing I want to say today, and then I give it to Bill. Don't walk away after planting. That's the worst thing you can do. I know it's very exhausting. You have fumigated, you have planted, everything is fine, but there are a lot of things which you have to do in those few weeks before dormancy. So in those few weeks between October and December, January. First of all, don't plant your weak plants, as I said, and get 5 to 10% more of plants than you need. And then after planting, check on your plants and see which one you have to replant. So I would keep some plants in case you have to replant some plots, because there are often some which do not perform, which you want to replace. You can still do that in the first week or so after planting. But if you do it too late, it's going to be too late because those plants are not going to develop anymore. So we recommend to use a drip applied fungicide to control Phytophthora root rot. It's a thing which can damage your planting a lot. You should control that. And then there are several other pathogens which you do want to control, which you do want to check for. Thyrum and switch are fungicides which can use for that, but Bill will talk about this a little bit more. And then we want to remove runners before end of fall. Before I answer the question, Joanna, I want one more thing. Because some of you will be late this year in planting. There is some of you will be tempted to use row covers to increase growing degree days before dormancy. So here are a couple of things on this row cover use. The first thing is you will have disease built up under those row covers. So you will have to control before and after for things like botrytis and mites especially. It is also important that if you use row covers, use them to increase your growing degree days, so to let your crowns develop better. Use them you have like this time window in November, like the last week of October all the way into like the last week of November, or halfway, like somewhere like those 4 or 5 weeks where you actually should use them, those row covers. Don't use them for the entire time. Make sure that you monitor your weather, make sure you know how many growing degree days you get. And then make sure that you measure temperatures under those row covers so that you know how many growing degree days you actually supply to your plants. Because a lot of plants can also tend to hyperflower. Chandler is a very good example for that. Chandler is a plant which I personally would not put a row cover on, because it doesn't need a lot of growing degree days. It's very flexible when you can plant it, and usually it's fine even on a later planting date without a growing degree days. Others, like Ruby June, for example, need potentially a lot more growing degree days, so they hover around 800 growing degree days or something. And so you need to monitor your weather and make sure that it's not getting too hot under the cover, and make sure that you supply growing degree days when it actually matters. So that's very, very important for your row cover use in fall, which is not to protect the plant. It is to increase the growth, the crown development of your plant if you are on a late planting. Also, a lot of research has shown that a late planting date, a row cover is not 100% a substitute for that, but it's better than nothing. So I definitely would do it, especially on those cultivars which do need more growing degree days, like Camarosa or Ruby June, if you are late on planting. Again, monitor your weather and just don't throw a row cover on it blindly. You can have an opposite effect of what you want to do. All right, I answered the questions in a second. This is something which I also see every year after planting. Phytophthora often a big problem. Anthracnose crown rot can be a problem. Neo-P can be a problem after planting. Not enough water for your plants, or a drip line is broken, or something happened to your water supply. Really important to check that. Your plant you don't leave enough time between fumigation and planting. That can cause a lot of damage to your plants. Incorrect planting, as I said, can cause a lot of damage to your plants. And then if you planted not very well developed plant material because you didn't order enough, can cause a lot of damage and to your plants as well. So those are the main things that I see every year happening in the fields. In 3 years from now, that list will look very different, but that's what I know right now. And Bill will talk about this. We do have IPM production guides. We're working also on a new strawberry production guide that I hope we could do it by now, but will be a little bit delayed, like somewhere around March that will be published. But this is a very good resource. It's for free. Everybody should go there. Everybody should download this. Everybody should look at this. It's updated every year. This is like from 3 years, so but the homepage looks exactly the same. Smallfruits.org. Everybody can remember that as well. Smallfruits.org. You will find the newest IPM guidelines on this homepage as well. And you go on IPM production guides, click on strawberries, a lot of resources. Everybody should have this. All right. There are a couple of other things, but I do want to first answer like questions. There are 3 questions in the chat box. Joanna asks, you recommend irrigation before transplanting? No, not necessarily. Usually it's wet enough. I recommend to water your plants in after transplanting. Do you want to put into the transplant water? Well, I don't necessarily recommend to put anything into the transplant water. It should be the water is really the most important part. With plug plants, I think overhead irrigation is good for like the first 3-4 days, and you should be fine. With bare root plants, you do want to overhead irrigate a little bit more. Rotomill is the stuff which you would put into your drip tape to control Phytophthora. But again, Bill will talk more about that. And then Martha asked any suggestion on planting management or certified organic berry production. Yes, very generic because we don't have a lot of time for this. Organic production, your cultural methods, so everything I talked about, planting death, soil, plastic content, all that becomes a lot more important the less fungicides and the less pesticides you can use. So having that and being on a crop rotation, so don't go into the same field all the time, is for organic or for sustainable strawberry production, very becomes more and more important. You have to be really on top of your cultural management because that's the main management method you have. And we do have a publication on that, which we wrote on sustainable management, which also goes over crop rotation and cover crops, which you can use. And Amanda will remind me to send you that, I hope. And,
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Awesome. And then Daniel is asking, growing your own plugs from tips this year. Do you have any tips, guidelines for doing this? Yes, I do. And I will send it to you. If you send me your email, I will send you those guidelines. We are working on it in the production, but I can send to do it right now. And you're welcome, Joanna. And yes, again, look at those resources. I will send you guys. Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. I will send you those resources to. So those are resources for you to look at. There's a strawberry school which we did, and Daniel, I will send you those plug plant information, and Amanda has to remind me on stuff. And I'm done for now. Thank you very much, and I give it to Bill.
All right, thank you, Mark. Wow, that was great. I'm just so pleased to have you in North Carolina. I've been here a long time, and boy, I'm glad to have you here. With a lot of good information there. So that's really nice. I'm going to share screen here briefly. What's our time like? I mean, we're at 5 o'clock. Do we have a weed talk to do next, or you're muted there.
We have 30 minutes left for the webinar, so
Okay, good.
feel free to
Okay.
roll with it. I have a 10-minute presentation, but I don't have to give it. If you need 30 minutes, you need 30 minutes. It's fine.
Okay. Oh no, I won't take nearly that much time. You have covered a lot of what I was going to cover anyway, so we're in good shape there. Okay, that should be sharing. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can, Bill.
Okay, very good. So, Mark, I appreciate the invitation to speak briefly about strawberry diseases, pre-plant considerations. So just want to run through a few things. This doesn't change a lot, just like the other pre-plant considerations. We have a pretty well devised production system, and the strawberry disease considerations are pretty much the same from year to year, but we'll take a look at them. And so to overview a little bit about pre-plant, fumigants and weather effects, and then the strawberry crown diseases. And Mark's already covered some of this. So first, I want to mention the regional guide. This is the one that's up online right now, the 2022 regional strawberry integrated management guide. Just a really great resource. Everyone should have this or make sure they have access to this because it's a much expanded version of everything you need to know for pest management on strawberry. So that's at smallfruits.org that Mark mentioned earlier. This is a corner of one of the tables out of that guide, just to give you an idea of what kind of information is there. This is our pre-plant discussion, and you see the different types of pest problems and the activities that are effective against that, how effective they are. And this guide provides this information not just for these cultural practices, but also for each of the pesticides or ag chemicals that you might use. So when you're trying to make a decision what to spray, what to do, it's broken out by season and by the types of pathogens that you might encounter. So a really useful guide, and should be your go-to resource there. One thing I wanted to mention, Mark talked about at length earlier, is your plant back time following fumigant use. And so this is a picture of from December of 2018. This was a strawberry field, really nice beds, just a beautiful job laying the plastic. It did everything right, but there was a problem with the fumigant because we had some really cool, wet fall weather. Fumigant was slow to dissipate, and so this is what the plants look like in December. And this is the risk you run planting back too soon behind a fumigant application. And I also want to mention that the fumigants, in addition to having this, as Mark talked about, the 3.5 week up to maybe 6 week decision you have to make on when to plant back. The fumigants also have rate specific plant back instructions. So the more the fumigant you use, the longer you have to wait. So if you really went in there and said, boy, I'm going to go with the max rate on this fumigant, look at the label, because in addition to a waiting period, it's also going to give you a safety window where you have to add additional days if you use an extra amount of fumigant. So just really be cognizant of this, and the fact that if we do have in cool, wet weather between the time you put the fumigant down and the time you plant, then the fumigant's going to be slower to dissipate. You may injure your plants. So punch holes, let the plastic air out for a day or 2 or 3, and if you're still smelling fumigant when you're out there, then you're not ready to plant back. As far as diseases, so just things to look for as you get plant material in. For anthracnose crown rot, anthracnose in general, the thing I look for on plant material that I've received, plugged plants in trays, is these small sort of shadow spots. They don't go all the way through the leaf, but they tend to be completely circular, perfectly circular, and they are an indicator that anthracnose is present in those plants. It's not proof positive, but it's a unique symptom, and it's something that you can look for very easily as you pick up and handle trays. So you start seeing this, know that you may have a problem to deal with going forward. Just some shots there of anthracnose crown rot when it's really severe in plug trays. You see here, upper right corner of the plug trays, waiting to be planted, and the anthracnose just running through the trays and killing a lot of plants before they even get set out in the field. So really something to be aware of. Be aware of water splashing this around and dispersing it if you do have it in the plants. If you get plants from more than one source or more than one variety, you see a problem in one variety, get them out of there, get them away from the plants that are clean. Do everything you can to keep from carrying this forward to the field, and try to make good judgments based on what you see of the plant health. As far as managing anthracnose crown rot, you're hopefully starting with disease-free plants. Monitor the fields, and I would take out infected plants in the fall to avoid spread. You can use a switch as a plant dip. Also, a bound is labeled for plant dips. Haven't seen a lot of this done, and not terribly enthusiastic about doing it. Switch can stunt the plants if you don't get them planted. Do the proper dip interval and the immediate plant back. So there are risks to doing the dip treatments, but they are an option if you do see problems on the plants. The other disease that we see sometimes in the fall is Phytophthora crown rot as a plant-borne problem. And so you see this brown discoloration in the crown of the plant, damping off in the trays before they're even set out. So this is our other big pathogen that historically we've seen in transplant material. And if you look at the roots under the microscope, what you're looking at here is a strawberry root that's been squashed on a slide under a cover slip, and you see the oospores, those round double-walled spore structures inside the roots. Then you have a Phytophthora or Pythium problem in those roots. So again, this is one of our really common diseases that can come in on plants. So for managing Phytophthora, again, clean plants, site selection and preparation is really critical. You want to avoid poorly drained sites. If you do have a Phytophthora problem on your site, and this is a pathogen that moves in free water in the soil. So if you have Phytophthora present and you have water that's not draining, or you have water in the interstices in the soil, then this is a pathogen that can spread down the road, spread from plant to plant. So really good soil drainage and bed prep saves you a lot of grief with Phytophthora. Again, it's a waterborne problem. The mefenoxam and metalaxyl are products that are effective and can be applied in the fall, also in the spring. So if you think you have a Phytophthora problem, I would strongly encourage you to send any symptomatic plants to the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. If you're not sure what you've got, they can diagnose it. Then you can use these products for Phytophthora control. And it's difficult to tell Phytophthora crown rot from anthracnose crown rot in the field, and yet the management strategies, the products you use, fungicides you use, are very different for the two. So you really need to make that distinction to make sure you're putting out the right product to control it. Also, briefly want to mention the Pestalotia or Neopestalotiopsis. Pestalotia is a group of fungi that have this distinctive looking spore that you see in this picture, and have always been around. And pathologists have all through my career sort of disregarded this type pathogen as a weak pathogen or a secondary invader. So we see it on plant material, but we don't get too excited about it. That has changed with the emergence of Neopestalotiopsis. which is a more pathogenic type of this fungus. Now, you can't look at it under the microscope and tell whether it's one of the weak pathogens or this new, more virulent pathogen. So it's causing a lot of stress and confusion as far as diagnosis. But if it is the Neopestaloceopsis species, it will be severe disease in the field. So you'll see lots of leaf infection. You'll see fruit infection, as you see here. This is a pathogen that we believe is introduced on planting stock. Again, it's not distinguishable from weaker fungi in that same group. So I really encourage you to know your plant source. There were some severe problems in Georgia in 2022 and this past spring. I think not so bad in Florida, where they've had really bad years in Florida have been really wet picking seasons, harvest winters. So it's a pathogen we're learning more about. If you're seeing symptoms, by all means, let's get it into the clinic and see what we've got. So just to summarize the pre-plant disease strategies: avoidance, use of clean plants, site selection and prep. In organic systems in particular, rotating the site to avoid planting in the same location year after year because you don't have the fumigant tool in your toolbox. I strongly encourage you to get problems diagnosed, either your county extension agent or you can send plants directly to the clinic. Make sure you know what pathogen you have, because that has a bearing on what you do to control it. And sometimes it's not a pathogen. Sometimes you'll have a problem that's abiotic, that has no pathogen present, and the lab can tell us that. So make your decisions and your control decisions based on what you actually have in your field. And the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic is a tremendous resource, and I hope you will use it. And the final comment there, again, don't plant too soon following fumigation, especially if it's cool, wet weather, because the fumigants will damage the plant. So read the label, watch your plant back times, and if you're using a fairly high rate, add that time in, because that's going to impact how safe it is for you to plant back behind that fumigation. I say, and that's about all I wanted to cover. Mark, I'll take a look and see if we have any disease related question. Okay, we have one question: whether oxidate is okay for an organic plant dip. It's okay. I don't know that it would do a lot of good. Oxidate is not going to control anything that's in the plant tissue, and these pathogens tend to be already inside the plant, in the root tissues, in the crown, or as latent infections on the plant material. So it is not going to clean up anything that's already in the plant. The next question, Daniel: how many years should you allow a field to lay over before planting again if you are not using fumigants? Boy, that really depends on how much land you have to play with. I think 1 year is good, 2 is better, 3 would be optimal. So the longer you can lay a field out, the better with the organic systems. And even then, you're not going to completely avoid the pathogens. What you'll do is they have to build up again during your season, so you'll still see recurrence of these sort of black root rot or root nibbler sort of fungi, this complex of Pythium and Rhizoctonia and other pathogens. But what you'll do is you'll get ahead of them, basically by laying a field out and letting the inoculum levels in the soil subside. Okay, what to use in question from Thomas: what to use organic production if disease is in the plugs? In an organic system, you're really using relying on all the cultural methods rather than using sprays. There's just not a lot of good fungicide options for treatment of infected plants. the things you can do is manage your water use really carefully, not wetting the plants any more than you have to, sort of the bare minimum irrigation to get them established. Anything you can do to remove dead tissue from the plants, either before the plugs are set or after, I think is beneficial. It's sort of a question mark there with botrytis over the years. The research has not been clear whether it's a great benefit, but in an organic system, I would really be working on plant by plant sanitation, removing dead leaves, crispy leaves, dead flower parts that may be on those plants. Anything you can pluck off as you handle the plants to clean them up is I think beneficial. Okay, Mark, I'll toss it back to you if you want to go to weeds, and again, I'm available as we all are in our jobs to help growers through your county extension agents or directly from us. So
24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Awesome. This was good. This was very good. Yeah, so now I'm getting a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I will talk a little bit about weed control, but there's a full disclosure here. I'm not a weed scientist by any means. So this will be a very rough talk. Basically, the main message is control your weeds. But there will be some information there which you probably will need. And then we do have a weed control specialist who is available via phone and email, and the information of that person is also in there. On the other note, I also put a link into the chat box about a sustainable strawberry production guide that we developed in collaboration with University of Arkansas, and that would be especially for Daniel and Martha, since you guys asked all those questions. There's a lot about crop rotation in there and cover crop use and other things, so definitely worth having a look. So that should be in the chat box, and you should be able to find that, and we send that information also out when we put everything online tomorrow afternoon. All right, so let me share my screen quick. Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can, Mark.
Okay, awesome. So this is a weed control update in strawberry. As a talk that Katie gave on Friday on a pre-plant meeting, and we just gonna go very quick over this. Basically, the main message is that there are several weed control options besides fumigant that you can use. Most of them are pre-plant options. So there's only one broadleaf fumigant, broadleaf herbicide that can be used over the top of strawberries. That also has a 30-day PI, so you do not want to use that when you have flowers. When you see flowers, that's when you should stop using herbicides over the top of strawberries. And we're mostly going to cover weed control in the beds right now, not in the row middles. So a lot of herbicide options are available for the beds that are pre-plant, which means pre-transplant. And here are a couple of the weeds that are available that are pretty common here. It's pigweed, Palmer amaranth, and common purslane. It's very common in the row middles. Usually what recommended is that you use a hooded sprayer. We do have a hooded sprayer in one of our strawberry fields at Castle Hayne, where Bill is located. We use paraquat there, and then you can use in the following year Chateau as a pre-plant in the bed, and then that will help you to reduce the seed bank in the bed as well. Chateau can be used as a pre-plant. That usually has to be applied at least 30 days before you actually plant your plants, because it can cause some damage to your plants if you don't do that. It also is important that you don't disturb that cover. So you're going to have to pre-bed your beds basically a lot earlier, apply your herbicide, and then lay your plastic later. So that's one option. With Chateau, it will control quite a bit of broadleaves and some grasses. Another thing, especially this year, if you guys are late in planting, you will use row covers. There will be a lot of weeds, and as I said, they will be in your planting bed already, and there's not a lot you can do to control that besides hand weeding when it gets to a point like this, you know. So what you can use is use Stinger at the recommended rate for strawberries. It's labeled for strawberries, and over the rope, over the top of the strawberry plants, that will control some of the broadleaves. And again, I don't know exactly which ones because I'm not a weed scientist, but it will help a little bit with your row cover application. So I would do this before I use row covers if you do have like a high weed bank, especially for those who do not fumigate and who do not use pre-plant herbicides. That would be an option to at least get a little bit of hand of it. And then Katie recommends to try gold pre-plant. Again, there's a 30-day plant back period, and you do want to have a minimal disturbance after you apply your pre-plant, but it works. Again, you find a lot of weeds under your row covers, especially if you apply them to increase your growing degree days. So if you do row cover use, you do want to make sure that you control for, as Bill said, for diseases. You want to check for mites. Things like Albion attract a lot of mites, and you do want to check for weeds later. And again, if you do have a lot of weed pressure, hand weeding is often the only option after this. So this is a very severe case, but weeds usually you don't only provide growing decreases to your strawberries, you provide growing decreases to everything under the row cover, including the weeds. Another thing which is important is that after planting, so we're jumping around a little bit and stuff. So now we basically after planting, it is important that you don't let your weeds going to a stage where they actually develop seeds, because that just increases your seed bank for the next year. So you do want to control the weeds in your field even after planting with herbicide application. So you do not want to get like to a point where it's in here that you do terminated your strawberries, but then you have weeds all over the place, and that only increases your weed pressure next year. So you don't want to have that, because there's only that much you can do with fumigants and herbicides to control weeds. As I said, each herbicide has limitations, and the pre-harvest interval is very, very important. As I said, there are some herbicides which you can use pre-planting that will control broadleaves and broadleaf weeds, but again, most of them have a 30-day pre-harvest interval, and it's very important that you keep that 30-day pre-harvest interval, because otherwise they can cause injury to your strawberry plants that you will grow. Pre-herbicide applied usually to pre-formed beds prior to laying plastic mulch, and then Stinger is the only option for broadleaf control that you have to apply post-transplant. So after your plants are planted, Stinger is the only option you have as a broadleaf herbicide over your strawberry tops. You do have more options in the strawberry beds, but you have to make sure that you have a hooded sprayer, and because you don't want to injure. Strawberries are very, very sensitive to most herbicides, so you don't want to injure your herbicides based on that. Grass herbicides can be sprayed over your strawberry pots as well if necessary. And then the only other option you have in strawberries is hand removal, which is a very common thing in strawberries. Again, the better you fumigate, and the better you do your weed control, the less you have to invest labor later in hand removal. And organic strawberries, since we do have some people who do organic strawberries here, hand removal is extremely important. And as Bill said and I said, if you go organic sustainable, your cultural methods become a lot more important. You do have to walk your field more, and you do have to remove more weeds by hand, because especially in organic system, you don't want to increase the competition between your strawberry plant and the weeds too much. And you also don't want to increase your seed bank. So the more you remove weeds and the less weeds you have that go into germination, the more you reduce your seed bank over time. Purple nutsedge and yellow nutsedge are a big problem, and you can see here the difference between those two. Yellow has like a pointy tip, where purple has a little bit broader tip. Either way, they point through the plastic, and they can be a pain. And Spartan is a pre-plant. Spartan applied as a pre-plant at 4 to 8 ounces to an acre, depending on your soil type. So with sandy soils, you're probably okay with 4, and if you're more heavy soils, you're probably okay with 8. At that recommended rate, will control some of the nutsedge. If you do have a big nutsedge problem, I would consider this pre-plant as an option. Yeah, then I want to just go over a couple of typical things. Henbit is a broadleaf that can control pre-plant with Chateau, with Spartan, or with Goal, and there are no post-emergence options available. So Henbit is not controlled by Stinger, and it will have to be hand weeded if you do not have a herbicide option before. But fumigants can control henbit quite a bit. But sometimes you see it popping off. You know, it depends how big your seed bank is, really. Same with chickweed, can be a big problem. Even in fumigated plots, we see that sometimes coming up. Chateau, Spartan, and Devrinol are the herbicides to control that. Again, pre-plant, before laying plastic. There's also no post-emergence options available. And you find a lot more information on how to apply those in the IPM guide that Bill and I advertised before. And again, you can reach out to Katie if you have more questions about that. Another one which is difficult to control is the Carolina geranium that sometimes comes up at 2. Again, hand removal is the only option here, unless you do a pre-plant Gold or pre-plant Spartan. So same with vetch. As long as your vetch, so Stinger Post can control vetch, you should get it to like a certain size before you control it. It can control vetch quite well. You don't want to get it to a stage where it covers all your strawberries, but it can be even then sprayed down with Stinger as well. So if you do have a lot of vetch in your strawberry field, Stinger at the recommended rates does actually a pretty good job to control this weed. And then if we go, another one which is pretty common is cut leaf. That can become really big, and it starts getting like those like teeth in the. So you don't want to get it to this, but this is a pretty big plant. You don't want to get it to this plant, this thing. Again, fumigants can control it quite a bit. If you do have a lot of pressure, I would again use a Gold or a Chateau as a pre-plant herbicide. Curly lock is another weed that can get very big. And has like a taproot as well, so it can be pretty deep. If it's like on a smaller scale, it can be controlled with Stinger as opposed to emergence as well. The thing with Stinger is, as soon as you see flowers on your strawberries, you should stop using Stinger, because it's about 30 days from flower to fruit, and Stinger has a 30-day PI, so you do not want to use Stinger if you see your first flowers that you want to keep on your strawberries. And then everything after that will have to be hand removed. And again, high weed pressure, I would recommend to use a pre-plant herbicide in combination with a fumigant if you really are in an area where you do have tons of herbicides. If you're an organic grower, crop rotation, and cultural methods and hand removal. Those are your options as an organic grower. And now I don't know what happened here, and Kearney spur is another post-emergent. There's no post-emergent for those. And then we're not going to talk about row middles because of the time. You will get this presentation as well with everything else. Herbicide options are Chateau, Dacal, Devrinol, and Prowl. And then post-emergence for row middle is quite a bit. Again, use a hooded sprayer because you do not want to. You do not want to control your strawberries. You don't want to injure your strawberries with this. Things like 2,4-D are not registered. We had that question in the last option, in the last meeting. And so 2,4-D, first of all, highly susceptible strawberries, so would not use it. And the Cline formulation, which it's not as volatile, is not registered yet for strawberries. So those are your options for this year, at least, which you can use in the row middles. And we're not going to talk about herbicide injury, but it happens quite a bit. Glyphosate drift can happen quite a bit on strawberries. You will see that here too. And then these are all your resources. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Katie. And she cannot be here today, but she has an email address and a phone number, and I will send you all that information in this presentation. And David, I will come back to you in an extra email. I see this. I can send you the people I know. And with that, if there are not any other questions, then I would say we conclude this strawberry pre-plant meeting in time as well, unless there are like any other questions. Everything will be sent and online, I hope, by tomorrow evening. If not by tomorrow, then by Thursday at some point. And then we have email addresses of everybody who registered you, so you will get an email from us with the link to the recording and with all the information we put in there. And if you have any questions, reach out to me, Bill, Gina, or Katie, or Amanda for that matter. And yeah, thank you very much for attending. Appreciate it. I hope you have a very good strawberry season.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.